Good morning, everyone. Deputy Chief Officer Trevor Owen. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered this morning and are spread across Victoria and pay my respects to elders past and present. In the audience this morning, we have District Planning Committee chairs, members of group management teams, we have brigade captains, strike team leaders, we have our acting CEO, Greaves, Acting Chief Officer Garry Cook, Duty Forecaster Kirsty Turner from the Bureau of Meteorology, members of the South East Region Leadership Team in the group, Jess Ploeger, our Regional Business Manager, Don Wilkie, District 8 Commander, and Stephen Keating, District 8 Commander. We have a range of other people, including our Brigade Ministry Support Officers and other functional managers. Firstly, I'd like to also thank Andy Oldroyd and Linda Cox for their work in pulling today together this morning. It is an important opportunity for us to engage across the region and really set off the initial steps for this bushfire season. So hopefully you'll find some good content in this morning's agenda that we've tried to really make volunteer friendly, hence why we're doing it on a Sunday morning. Before I start though, I just want to recognise the efforts. It's 12 months on now since the fires took place in East Gippsland and North East Victoria. And we saw 1.5 million hectares involved in last season's fires across East Gippsland and the North East. A total of 3,500 bushfires were responded to last season, with a commitment of over 8,000 of our members that responded to the bushfires in East Gippsland and the North East. The first of the fires started with lightning strikes yesterday, 12 months ago on November the 21st in East Gippsland, and it lasted for 98 days of bushfire activity, with the final containment on the 27th of February 2020, and that was out of the snowy complex of fires. So there was big impact across what we know in the eastern part of the region, involved 405 losses of residential property, 653 non-residential structures were also lost. And there was over 7,000 livestock lost by farmers across the North East and East Gippsland. And tragically, there were 5 people that died, 3 of which were Forest Fire Management Victoria firefighters. And our hearts and minds are with those families and friends that lost, and that for the very many are still recovering even today. So we're working with those communities, and we will be doing so over the next few months, both in preparing them again, because there's still a lot of anxiety, but there's also many questions that those communities still want answered for. So we're working closely with them, and we'll do much of that work in the lead up to Christmas and beyond. We know that bringing us together last season, as we knew with the fires and the incredible dryness that was across East Gippsland, and with the likelihood of the fire level and the risk increasing as we got into last summer, and it did, there was benefit in bringing our senior volunteer leaders together and briefing them about the risks. And that really served us well across the summer period as we responded to the fires in the Far East. And everybody knew, or better than what they did before in terms of the risk, and what we needed to do as a region to go and support our colleagues in District 11. And I'd have to say this region really stood up well. And for many of those members across Victoria, many of them came from this region in support of East Gippsland. So I just want to thank everybody for their efforts. Now, getting into today's agenda, I just want to quickly outline, it will be covering the bushfire season expectations, of which our Acting Chief Officer Garry Cook will do. We'll also get an update from our Acting CEO, Catherine. I will then cover the volunteer engagement and the role of groups in providing an update. We'll hear from our seasonal weather update, and we'll get that from the Bureau of Meteorology from Kirsty Turner. We'll also cover the pre-positioning of vehicles that served us incredibly well and saved a lot. It gave some extra capacity into District 11 last year in our thinking for this season. Commander Don Wilkie will cover the state aircraft update. Commander Steve Keating will talk about ground observing and in-field support and where we're taking that for this season and beyond. Our Regional Business Manager, Jess will cover the pandemic management team, discuss how we're responding to a COVID environment. We'll also finish with some questions and answers. So today's really the first opportunity that we've had to come together as a region, and it is an important opportunity for our engagement with you to brief you on some of the high-level topics that are facing us for this bushfire season, but also afford you the opportunity to raise questions. And you can do so by, on the right-hand side of your screen, just at any stage, loading into the question answers function, and we'll facilitate those towards the end of this meeting. Also, this meeting will be recorded for those who, unfortunately, for whatever reason, whether it be work or private commitments, are unable to make it. We've had quite a range of requests for us to be able to record that and circulate that after today's meeting. So now I'd like to hand over to our Acting Chief Officer, Garry Cook, for the Chief Officer's expectations for this summer period, bushfire season. Thanks, Garry.
Thanks, Trevor. Good morning, and sure that I've got video. Here we go. Thanks, Andy, for the slides. Firstly, I'll also acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands in which we all gather today, and I'm coming to you this morning from the northeast. In fact, after coming home up the Hume Highway last night, and I tell you, it's pretty hot and dry. So hope it's nicer where you are. 37 degrees forecast here today, so the summer is certainly signalling at the moment. Anyway, things are warming up and drying off, as would expect this time of year. So we might just go to the next slide, Andy, and I'll go straight into some of the expectations that have been set for this season. So the first thing is that, as has been the case for a number of years now, we've actually set the minimum safety requirements for the bushfire season, and that is that the expectation is that all of our firefighters going onto the fireground during the bushfire season will have, as a minimum, the general firefighter or the minimum skills for those that have obviously previously completed that, successfully undertaken the entrapment drill. Obviously, that's a hands-on drill, and we've had some limitations during the winter months because of COVID in our ability to do that. And the Tree Hazard Awareness Pack, which is every 3 years, and I'd encourage both members and also training officers to just check the membership, because interestingly enough, I went on and checked my own a couple of months ago, and I thought I'd completed it in 2018, but I'd completed it in 2017, so mine was set to expire, so I jumped on and completed that again. So just in terms of keeping tabs of where everybody's at, good chance to make sure that those are in place. So the entrapment drill, you'll know clearly, and members will clearly know whether they have or haven't done it this year, but certainly the Tree Hazard Awareness one is one for people just to check their currency, and training officers have access to that through the LMS. So that's it. Again, and we make clearly no apologies for this, and Trevor's just outlined, the dangers of last summer. 3 tragically, firefighters that didn't make it home to their families, and we want everybody to come home safely. So the messages are not just there for the sake of putting them there. We actually know that these 3 things are clearly having firefighters with the base understanding, so that everybody can look sideways and around them and know that everybody that's on the fireground with them has got those base level skills. Really important to actually, from a just looking after each other point of view, that we do that. And we know that the burn over and burn under issues for our brigades. We always encourage people to, through the dynamic risk assessment and anchor points and all of those things, not to get into that situation, but should a crew find themselves in that situation, knowing what to do and how to act is so important. And we know about tree hazards. And again, really tragically last year, one of the firefighters killed by a falling tree. We had a number of near misses reported of falling objects, which is fantastic. Near miss reporting is really good because that actually helps us understand what the risks are, but there is absolutely no doubt about the hazards of trees. So again, everybody maintaining their skills in that space is so important. Just a quick snapshot as of yesterday, across the southeast region, tracking at about just under 48% of the just over 5,000 650 operational members in the 5 districts across the southeast region have completed all of those activities. Now, I'd suggest the numbers there will be underrepresenting, that there will be still some people who have completed that haven't actually yet got the data entered. So I'd expect that number to be slightly higher than that. And whilst it looks like we're tracking at under 50%, I also know that there is an enormous amount of activity going on as the COVID restrictions have been able to be lifted, and brigades are actually getting back into some of that activity. It's been quite a challenging space, and fortunately we're able to get everybody back on the tools and actually allow some of those activities to be completed. Thanks, Andy. Next slide. So there's a number of expectations, 8 in fact, that I've just outlined here, and they've been in play now for a number of months, but really from myself, when I put these together, it was really about making sure that we've got the focus right in terms of safety. So the first one, no surprises, that your safety is the most important consideration. Every one of our team return home safely every time. It's a pretty simple message, but it is so, so important. Firefighting is a dangerous proposition. We all know that. We can't ever be complacent about it. We understand that it is always going to be a risky environment, but we want people to come home safely every time. The second one is about considering how you'll prepare yourself this year, because it is different to the other years, and that's because of the fact that we're dealing with firefighting with a COVID, called a COVID overlay is a bit of the colloquial term that comes into play. But that is the fact that COVID is with us. It's that carbon monoxide. We can't see it, we can't smell it, but we actually have to anticipate that it's there with us. And if we don't, then the risks actually become quite significant. So we just have to practice good hygiene, good social distancing, crews responding, staying together. But some of those aspects on the fire ground that we would have traditionally done, maybe mingling around a barbecue after a fire, a catering location, or even just, around a quick fill pump or something like that, we've just got to actually be more conscious this year. So everybody has to think about themselves, their crews, and how we're going to do that. Importantly, and this one speaks for itself every time, but respond with heavy weight of attack. Hit fires hard and fast. We actually know that, it's not a very, scientific game. Every big fire started from a small fire. And so if we can keep them small, then our success is really what we actually want. That's protecting our communities. That's keeping our communities safe. And ultimately gets our people back off the tools and back home safely as quickly as possible. So weight of attack, hit the fires hard and fast. Oddly enough, this sounds a little bit contrary to the last term, but just slow down a little bit and protect yourself and others from coronavirus, ensuring good hygiene practice at all times. That's just those simple little measures, so saying about preparing, and it goes really to point 2. Just consider how we'll prepare so that we've actually got our minds in that space before we respond. And I've got to say, we're talking about the summer bushfire season here. We know that our brigades have been responding to emergencies all year round. Coronavirus has been with us since early March, and we've continued to respond all year round very, very successfully. We've not had one brigade that's had to stand down for any length of time due to poor practices around response to an incident. So it's fantastic. Next slide, please, Andy. So this is the one that I actually, and it's so important for our forum today. Leadership at every level is critical to our success. Act decisively and deliberately. The worst decision anyone can make is not making a decision. I know that's an old cliche, but it's so true, and it rings true in what we do. So act decisively and act deliberately, but importantly, act safely. But the thing here is about leadership is at every level. Everybody has a space in the leadership domain. It's not the incident controller only. It's not the operations officer only. It's not the strike team only. It's not just the crew leader. It's everybody's got an opportunity to lead and be contributing to the leadership and the success. Continue to find innovative ways to engage and prepare with your crews using technology. And there's been some magnificent examples of this across the southeast region, which we've had displayed to us, where brigades during coronavirus, during those dark, cold winter months, have found ways to stay connected with their members, found new ways to do that. And we've actually, today's an example, we're scattered all around the state, we're talking to screens, and we're communicating in a different way. But it's not to say that that's the only way. So continue to look for innovative ways to engage and prepare with your crews where possible. protect our most vulnerable people, especially those at high risk for coronavirus. We know that in some areas our older members are at the moment looking and feeling a little bit more reluctant to get involved, either with the training or considering about response. And I absolutely respect that for all of the right reasons. So we need to actually have that in our mind. We need to make sure that we're protecting those people and looking after them throughout this challenging time. And above all, and last of all, take care of yourself. Take care of your crews, both physically and mentally. But we're no good to anybody unless we're actually ready to go. So physically and mentally ready to go is such an important thing. So, you know, no big nights out before jumping on a strike team to go away or anything like that. We know things can happen, but my point there is you're not looking after yourself, you're not being fair to yourself, and you're certainly not being fair to your crew. So just being prepared is the most important thing that we can possibly do for yourself and for your crew that you're working with. Thanks, Andy. Next slide. So what we've done is, and I'm sure there's been just so much communication going out. I understand that around coronavirus, it's been such a dynamic space. But what we are doing is actually moving into what we're calling COVID normal activities as soon as possible on our roadway to return. So there were some communications went out late last week, which is you know, sort of lining us up around where we're at with the restrictions easing and activities such as increasing the density limits at our fire stations. So no more than 20 indoors and no more than 50 outdoors. So gatherings like that, and that interestingly doesn't add up to 70. So 50 is still a maximum, but 20 indoors or 50 outdoors or a total gathering of 50. Group exercises. So we've had some issues around how we're actually going to mobilise group exercises. My position around that has been really clear, that providing we actually stick to the principles, this is how we actually operate. This is how we'll actually operate when we go to battle. And in fact, last week we had strike teams out of District 17 deployed to fires into the Little Desert. So we know that we've actually got to function. So let's actually exercise as we will function. We've got our people well and truly skilled and trained. Let's get the opportunity to get out and dust off those principles of how we actually mobilise strike teams and function, whether it's an intergroup or a group exercise, but those activities are underway. So brigade training, again, in terms of limiting time, but certainly back in and back on the tools, which is so important. Community engagement activities, again, ability to get back into communicating with our communities in a face-to-face and an active way. Again, limits on numbers and things like that. So we're not breaching any of the protocols. We're actually just getting back into the space. Things like Santa runs, you know, such an important community aspect. You know, we're such a from the community for the community type model. We know that the Santa run is such an important thing for many of our brigades. How we actually achieve that in a way that actually allows us to do what we do. Yes, there'll be some small tweaks that we have to do that, just like operationally, but we want to get back into those things. Brigade meetings and brigade elections, same thing. So in terms of getting back into the space where we can function in more of a, we'll call it a COVID normal environment, that we can actually get those things on, and importantly also fundraising activities. So there's a lot more information on the intranet around that. I don't want to go into every one of those specific details, but just keep your eyes out. Ask, if you're uncertain, ask the questions. Check out what's on the CFA intranet site, and or speak to your local district personnel, and they'll help you through that process. Thanks, Andy. There you go. So that's the end of my slides. I might just, if I can, just wrap up on a couple of things there. So firstly, Trevor's given a really good outline of where we're at, just the anniversary date, of course, yesterday of the start of the fires that caused so much heartache for so many people across Victoria, and particularly through the southeast region. We know that, but obviously in the upper northeast, in the fire that came across the river from Talmalmo, and you know, caused significant grief up in the Upper Murray. But there are also fires in the southwest that in any other year would have actually got significant airplay, but due to the fact that they're only about 6,000 hectares and burning in World Heritage sites and really complex to manage, probably didn't even blimp our radar. But if you think about that any other time of the year and any other season, they may have. So it was a really tough year last year. We rolled straight out of the fire season into coronavirus and the really significant shifting lanes of the activity around that. We had a VAGO report, an IGEM report, a royal commission, and then we had to deal with a fire services reform, all with a COVID overlay over the top of us. So it's been as challenging, I think, a year as I can ever recall. I mean, 2020 is one just to etch into the history books. But what has stood proud is the way that our people, our whole organisation, I say our people, that's everyone here, it's everyone that's not here, but those that you're representing today, the way people have stood up and continued to protect their communities, really not have a blimp on the radar, not miss a beat, and really, really admirable for the way that our people have actually gone about that in such a professional manner. So congratulations, I tip my hat to you all. The other thing that I've been saying is, and Kirsty will talk about this when she gives us the update from the Bureau, but we're looking at a La Nina year. At the moment, November's been quite dry, with the exception down in the southwest where we had floods at the start of the month or in late October, but realistically it's been quite dry. So La Nina, in terms of a forecast, is still brewing. Where the moisture and when the moisture comes is yet to be determined. The forecast outlook looks, as though we could still have quite a bit of moisture to come through. But until it lands, and until we know what that means, we're still actually got to be ready. So looking after our people and being ready, such an important fact for us to keep at the front of our mind. And the last bit I would say is that if you look back through the history books, there's a few years that actually I've lined up with, and 1968, 69, and for those that recall or have read about the Lara fires, and tragically 28 lives lost down there on the 8th of January. And then you go to the 12th of February, 1977 with the Streatham fires, which took 4 lives and reportedly another 7 that were contributed to by the fires. It only takes one bad day to have a really bad summer. So we need to continue to keep our eye on the ball. I suspect that it's probably going to be more in the west and the north of the state than it will be in the east and the south, but we'll have to take that as it comes. So thanks for your time. Importantly to you all, we've got a new Chief Officer in Jason Heffernan. So Jason will be starting on the 30th of November, and I'm sure that when Jason gets the opportunity to get out and meet you all, and you'll make him very welcome into the ranks of CFA as our new Chief. I also want to thank everybody for your support and input to the last 5 months, and I've really appreciated your some of the discussions we've had with the team throughout the region. So thanks, Trevor. Thanks, Andy, and I'll finish up there.
Thanks, Chief. And look, on behalf of South East Region, Garry, thank you for the past 5 months. Your leadership as the Acting Chief Officer has simply been outstanding during what's been a very difficult period and a complex period as we've worked through a number of issues in the current operating environment. But on behalf of this region, we just want to thank you for your leadership and management over the past 5 months. It's been outstanding in what has been, as I said, a difficult and challenging environment. So I hope you enjoy your next 2 weeks leave. You've well and truly earned it. Thanks again, Garry, and I'd now like to welcome our Acting CEO, Catherine Greaves. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Trevor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good-o. All right. And firstly, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we all meet today and pay my respects to elders, past and present, and I also extend that respect to other Indigenous people who may be present today as well. And yes, I can only echo your words, Trevor, and thank you, Garry. I especially want to thank you for your tireless leadership and support of me as well in the last 5 months, as you and I have jumped into acting roles at a pretty tumultuous time for CFA. So enjoy your well-earned time off again. And thank you, everyone else, for your tireless dedication and commitment to your communities as you prepare to front up to whatever this bushfire season has to throw at us on the back of an incredibly challenging season that began this time last year, as mentioned earlier. Look, I won't spend long with my update, except to provide you with a brief background on CFA's transformation program and the journey that we're starting on. And from the time I started at CFA some 5 months ago, I've consistently heard repeated calls for the need to improve how we listen to and respond to our volunteer members' voices. And put simply, it's been a very common theme that our volunteers feel done to, and we clearly need to do much better to set ourselves up to service and support our volunteers, who are in turn giving up their precious time, as you are, to do the same for their communities. So specifically, and I have to say through the Southeast region, Listen and Learn, we learned a lot from those presentations, and I thank you for that. It was a really good grounding for me. But what you said, amongst a lot of other things, is that you want to engage in genuine consultation and improved two-way communication, and that members are seeking a CFA leadership that understands the volunteer ethos and heritage. And I just couldn't agree more. I just think they're such incredibly important elements of what we're trying to reaffirm here. We currently have a really ad hoc system for doing that, which is often dependent on individual approaches and just sheer goodwill, but one that's not particularly well supported by systems and standard and a robust framework for engagement. And so I openly acknowledge that CFA needs to develop a framework that provides a solid foundation for our approach and practice to volunteer engagement, and one that provides tangible evidence as well that we're committed to change. So from tomorrow night, we'll commence our first series of volunteer engagement sessions, specifically for Southeast on Tuesday night. So we're running these as open sessions across each region and inviting any and all volunteers to participate. And this is just our first step to introducing the transformation program at a high level and seeking feedback for development of our framework for engaging volunteers. So this includes delving into your issues and opinions to understand what works and what doesn't, and to ensure that we build a framework that's adaptive to the needs and preferences of our various members. I'm really mindful of the timing of these sessions over the next couple of weeks, as they coincide obviously with our seasonal preparations and activities, and your own work, your time with your friends and families, obviously pre-Christmas as well. And I just wanted to highlight that this isn't a one-off opportunity. It's just the start of a new way of working, and one that we'll continually build on and evolve based on our members' needs and feedback. So to that end, I do acknowledge the enormous challenges, as Garry has done earlier, that we've faced this year, coming straight out of the intensity of the last bushfire season, with barely an opportunity to take a breath before being hit by COVID. That was certainly my experience. I was in the State Control Centre over that period, and literally one ended and the other began, and there was some significant overlap in the recovery sphere. So it's been a pretty full-on time. And then, of course, as Garry's mentioned, the various reviews, the actions coming out of those, and then fire services reform to top it up. So somewhat of a perfect storm, I would say, in the world of CFA that's made this an incredibly challenging time. I acknowledge also that it's a really fine line between overdoing it and underdoing it. So we're getting a lot of interest and push for change. And all I can say is engage if you can, and please encourage your members. But again, if the current pace precludes it at this time, that's also okay. And that's the nature and the challenge of the business that we're in. And our role is to adapt and to suit the needs of our members. So, look, I think that's probably just about enough for me, but in closing, I would really sincerely like to thank you for your remarkable dedication and contribution to your roles, and specifically for your leadership, which is incredibly valued by CFA's board and our executive as well, and most especially and importantly, continuing to be so valued by your individual communities and the Victorian community as a whole. So, look, thanks, Trevor, for the opportunity to listen into the briefing today, and I'll pass the microphone back to you. Cheers.
Great, thanks, Catherine. And as Catherine pointed out, our opportunity is on Tuesday night, so I encourage you to join that conversation with Catherine, as it's important about our future, and we're really trying to engage as much as we can, seeking your feedback so that we're on this journey together. So again, I encourage you to join that, register and join that on Tuesday night. All right, volunteer engagement is the next topic, and also what I'm referring to is CFA 2.0. And when I refer to it as CFA 2.0, the reason I am is because fire service reform is an interesting topic that I know that many have mixed feelings about. But importantly, it's about CFA and making it even better than what it has been before. Not saying it hasn't been. It's been a great organisation. I think we all accept that, and for many of us, we've been in this organisation a long time, family, friends. And we've dedicated our life to it in many cases, and we want to make this organisation even better and stronger into the future, and therefore, communicating in a manner that expresses a view to say that CFA is going to build even better and stronger is important. If I can draw us back to the outcomes of the DPHC Chair's Listen and Learn session, We're really trying to engage as much as we can, and what we did on the 25th of August of this year is our 5 DPC chairs had the opportunity to present directly to our acting CEO and acting chief officer, transformation manager, strategic executive, about CFA's future, really providing an insight. And it was just an opportunity for senior leaders in this organisation at the highest level to simply listen to what CFA needs to do to make it even better and stronger in the organisation for the future. And it was a really amazing exercise to just simply listen and learn from our volunteers. And the key themes included staff support and skills, CFA being more of an autonomous organisation, the important role of groups, training, also member consultation, training and systems, interagency relationships, volunteer incident management, and CFA value, among a whole range of other topics as well, but they're probably the key items that were picked up. And that's been importantly informing a transformation piece of which you'll start to see come Tuesday night. But it was really, really important. Again, listening to our volunteers, you're on that journey, you need to tell us, and it was a real opportunity for us to simply listen and learn. And I know a number of the groups fed into the DPC chairs, which built the presentations, and Catherine, as the acting CEO, took that to the executive, of which we videoed as well. And again, the feedback was really good, exceptional, in fact, in terms of the benefit that that's offered the organisation in understanding some of the complexity of the issues that we're facing and where our people want to see the organisation into the future. So it's important work, and it's certainly been welcomed by the regional leadership team, in executive leadership team, and it's certainly only one step towards our future, but an important step. So we're working to establish a more permanent advisory council at a regional level. We've got strong connections at a district level and use DPCs, district planning committees, to do that work. But again, at a regional level, and getting that connection and that buy-in at the executive level is really important from our base volunteers. And Catherine's really opened those doors up, and as has Garry, to setting up those sessions. And I think that's one benefit that's come out of the COVID environment. It is the use of video technology and sort of refining that so that we can better connect than we ever have before. So again, it's one step, but an important step to shaping our future. But we'll continue to have those sessions. We're continuing to build so that we've got those advisory mechanisms to regularly get the voice of the volunteer at the highest level in the organisation, and make sure that that connection piece is understood, but also that avenue and that structuring supports that, so that on a regular basis we can come together and make sure that we're, more than we ever have before, engaging and communicating and committing to the future, listening to our volunteers. That leads me into the role of groups, and as we well know, there was a significant amount of work started almost 8 years ago now. Time goes by on refining the role of groups and what that should look like in the future. And if it's one thing we do know, we need to land that piece of work. And I know our acting chief has been encouraged by the fact that the group issue has come up again, but it is certainly an opportunity for us in the future to grow it. And it was certainly discussed at length during the listen and learn session. So over many years now, it's been one of those issues that we haven't, as I said earlier, landed. We need to do that, and we need to support groups into the future in providing clarity about the role and the function and the structure of groups, so that it supports back into districts, regions and headquarters as an important management resource. So again, resolving, implementing change and developing our volunteers is one of the most important things that we can do that, and groups play an integral role in that. And that also services the important operational aspect of level 2 emergencies. We've recently circulated previous work that came out of the role of groups to a number of, all groups, but also through the DPCs, asking for feedback. And we're looking to establish a small working group, and that will also be incorporated into a state working group to be able to, again, not reinvent the wheel, but refine and importantly build on the work that's been previously started so that we can, again, strengthen the clarity and the role of groups into the future. So there's been much work done, but again, hopefully over the next 6 to 12 months, we can really resolve the group issue and get that clarity. Member engagement principles is another important body of work that we've been doing, and again, those listen and learn sessions were just the first of a number of steps to achieve our volunteer member engagement. And again, I'm after your thoughts. You can express them to me either in this forum or certainly via email or back through DPCs, so that we can again try and build and strengthen that relationship. Post-fire services reform, again, I referred to it as CFA 2.0, and we can call it what we want, but again, it is about CFA's future and about making CFA an even stronger, better, volunteer-focused firefighting force. So we'll continue to build those member engagement principles, but I am after your ideas and ways that we can do it. And some of them we've done already. So we're out there consulting where we can in some of the decision making. We're achieving that through open and honest communication, volunteer involvement at strategic planning levels, and we're trying to set up those structures again to encourage that to happen so that we will get volunteer representation at the appropriate levels. Development of our volunteer leaders is an important one, and we're doing work in the background to again strengthen that and offer those opportunities in a true development sense. Evidence-based decision making and everything that we do underpins CFA values. So these are some of the key themes that we're picking up through the volunteer engagement. I know that our acting CEO and the executive and many others are looking at volunteer charters, and again, it's timely that they be reviewed and strengthened again in the focus of CFA, volunteer firefighting organisation supported by great staff that can build this organisation to an even better level than it's ever been before. So we're committed to that, and again, those membership engagement principles, I'm interested in your feedback in how we do that. They're just some of the initiatives that I and the regional leadership team and others have done already. But if there's other ways that we can do it and strengthen that, then I'm certainly interested in hearing that from you. Now, if there's nothing further, we'll move on to, again, our senior weather updates. Andy, do you know if Kirsty's been able to join us?
Yep. Trevor, she's on the line. She should be good to go.
Right, thank you. And again, I just encourage you to use the opportunity for a question and answer. On the right-hand side of your screen there, you can load in your questions. We will get the opportunity at the end of this to go through those questions, so it's not as though we're overlooking them. And Andy will facilitate a session at the end and direct those questions to the most appropriate person to be able to respond. So opportunity again, don't hold back, put your questions there. And again, we'll reply to them at the end of this session. All right, so without any further ado, an important aspect of any summer period or any bushfire season is the seasonal weather update. And I'm sure Kirsty Turner has some great information from the State Control Centre Bureau of Meteorology duty forecaster. It's across to you, Kirsty.
Thank you, Trevor. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me along. We're always happy to chat about the weather. So, yeah, that's what I'll do for the next 15 minutes or so, with more of a taste on what the season's looking like. So a little bit about what we've had in the last sort of 6 months, 12 months, and how that's going to look in the next sort of 3 to 4 months. Have we got the presentation there? I can't. Oh yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Andy. Okay, so yes, I'm the Victorian, one of the Victorian Emergency Services meteorologists. Kevin, you probably have all heard of, but there's a few of us that sort of rotate through the role. If you could switch to the next slide. So here's a little bit of a summary on the climate briefing particularly for Victoria. So starting off there, so these are updated, I think fortnightly. So you can access this information on our external webpage. But yeah, this is the latest. So rainfall and soil moisture. So we actually had quite a wet October, with most of the states seeing near to above average rainfall. Unfortunately, November hasn't fared quite so well, with most of the state well below average, in fact. Just, I guess, a little update on that. We are seeing storms and showers moving across our state today and tomorrow. So for your region, more likely tomorrow. Even with those falls, I think we're still looking below average. And then we're really finding up for quite a stretch of dry days once sort of the residual showers clear out on Tuesday. So it's not looking like we're going to quite recover up to average rainfall in November at this stage. So what this means is, I guess, our catchments are starting to dry out. So we are only locally 50 to 60% about Gippsland, the Yarra and the Northeast Ranges. Now, to predict, I guess, how the season's going to look, we really focus on our climate drivers. So La Nina, you've probably all heard, is active at the moment. So what that means for particularly Eastern Australia, is higher rainfall. And this is looking like it'll persist until the end of summer. Another driver is the IOD, otherwise known as the Indian Ocean Dipole, and that's looking neutral at the moment, and looking like it'll stay neutral. And the other driver is the Southern Annular Mode, or otherwise known as SAM, and La Nina tends to favour a positive SAM. Currently it's neutral, slightly positive, and it should probably stay broadly positive for the coming months. So this actually enhances that wet signal that the La Nina produces for our east coast of Australia. And yeah, so I guess we model these drivers, and then the climate outlook tells us a little bit about that weather. So the climate model indicates that above average rainfall will broadly affect Victoria, particularly northern, and I'd probably say even eastern areas. We'll have a look at these charts shortly, through December to March. The strength of the signal has weakened slightly recently, but it is still above average. Temperatures are also looking to be above average, particularly the minimum temperatures, but also not as strongly though, the maximum temperatures. And another, I guess, aspect of La Nina means that we tend to have less extreme heat days, though they're likely to have more association with humidity, which can be a health impact. And we'll go to the next slide, please. So now this is a bit of a summary on all sorts of severe weather and across all of Australia, so not specific to Victoria as such. So just to give you a bit of a feel, I guess, of what our spring, summer is looking like in comparison to other years. So bushfire activity, fairly similar, whereas I think you probably would have seen last year it would have been an increase. But there is a slight increase in WA. So heat waves, similar. More likely to see some widespread flooding, which we've already seen some reasonable riverine flooding in the last couple of months. So that's probably kind of ticked off there. Severe storms, similar. Drought, look, improvement likely, but not sufficient. So we'll have a little bit of a clawing back there, but yeah, we're still in these drought conditions. Dust, similar conditions. Coral bleaching, probably not so relevant to us. Marine heat wave, average to above average. Cyclones, again, not so relevant to us, average to above. Those cyclones, they don't directly affect us, but they can bring significant amounts of moisture down to southern Australia. So they can indirectly affect us. And an interesting one, which I might, if I've got enough time at the end, show you more likely for some coastal flooding erosion. So we've had a few events along the New South Wales coast over spring. So yeah, that's a more likely scenario as well. We'll just go to the next slide, please. Okay, so rainfall maximum temperatures. So this is what has occurred. So we're looking here at January to October. So they're the complete months for this year so far. So you can see that our rainfall deciles are generally average to above average, and our maximum temperature deciles for Victoria are again average to above average in the east. So that was January until the end of October, and now we'll have a look at the 3-month chart. So if we go to the next, beautiful, thank you. August to October, so you can see that a little bit more above average across Victoria. So that's sort of explaining the wetter few months that we've had, particularly October. And again, our maximum temperatures are above average to average over in the west there. And now if we have a look at the next slide, which should be October. So you can see October was a wet month. We did have above to very much above average in some areas, with average to above average temps in the state. Okay, the next slide, please. So hopefully you're getting a bit of a feeling that we've had a bit more rainfall this year. We attribute that to La Nina. So what does this mean for our rainfall deficiencies? So you can see we're not deficient as such from April to October for our state. Unfortunately, WA is, and that sort of explains why their bushfire risks are elevated this coming season. But I would like to point out, even though we are talking about more rainfall and we've done okay this year, if you look at a longer time period, so on the right there, we've got April 2018 through to October 2020, so a 31-month map there. It does show that we are still deficient, severe deficient in parts of Gippsland. So there is that still underlying dryness. The next slide, please. This is just zoomed in on Victoria. I won't spend too much time looking at this one. We've really talked about the past few months, so we might move on, please. Okay, so we've talked about rainfall and what that means. So the next logical step really is to flow on to our root zone soil moisture. So this is the moisture in the lowest 1 metre of soil. So obviously the way we get this rainfall will vary these maps. So if you're getting a lot of runoff, you're not going to get a lot of root zone soil moisture. But we've got a comparison here of 3 years, so all of October. So we've got the big one, which is the current year, 2020. We've got quite a wet year in 2016. And for comparison's sake, you can see last year, which was dry, very dry. So we're not even though we're above average, it wasn't extremely wet October compared to some years, but it also wasn't dry. So we're somewhere in between there, really. Go to the next slide, please. And I thought this was an interesting one. So this is our grassland curing. So on the right there, we've got our latest curing map that gets updated every Monday. fairly standard looking map for this time of year. But interesting, I just wanted to point out last year, so I've grabbed the similar sort of time curing map from last year, and you can see how dry it was in Gippsland, particularly around the lakes there, how cured some of those grasses were already. So good to see we're not following that track, considering the season we had last year. I guess, though, something that we're all probably quite aware that if we do get good rains in the spring months, that we sort of produce more of these fuels that don't take that long to dry out. But certainly at this time of the year, we're looking much better than we were last year. And the next slide. Thanks. Okay, so we'll just spend a little bit of time now looking at our climate influences. So this is a link that you can access on our web page. So if you go to the Bureau web page and find climate, you should be able to see Australian influences. So we've got all sorts of things going on here. I guess the ones I wanted to talk about was La Nina, which you can see is a Pacific Ocean. It's up on off the Queensland coast there. It's a Pacific Ocean driver that affects our weather. There's the Southern Annular Mode, which I mentioned earlier, which is in the south of Southern Ocean, really. And then there's also the Indian Ocean Dipole, which, funnily enough, is in the Indian Ocean. So we'll have a little look at those now. If we go to the next slide, we'll have a look. Start with La Nina. Lots of information here. So on the right there is a snapshot of what La Nina means for Australia. So some statistics there on how we measure it, what it means, some examples. So I'm not going to read all of that. That'll be a bit boring for you to listen to. I guess the main summary here is on the left-hand side, we've got our tracking of our La Nina, and so the blue down the bottom there is La Nina. If you're going up into the sort of white middle band there, that's more of a neutral situation, and then the red at the top is El Nino, which is related to drying. So you can see we've got the tracking of the last sort of 4 months, and then you can see the projections. So the green line is the forecast mean. So it is expected to stay La Nina until, at this stage, April. But you can also see the spread there that, that could vary. And there's, the longer you go on, you get a wider spread. But generally, I guess the key here is that La Nina typically brings more rainfall to particularly the east coast of Australia, but generally Australia. And so that's kind of the outlook we're looking at for the summer ahead. If we go to the next slide, please. We've got the Indian Ocean Dipole. We won't talk about this one too much because it's in neutral and it's expected to stay that way. But yeah, you can see some information there. You can access, again, these all from our webpage if you're interested to chase up these after this session. And the next one will be the Southern Annular Mode. So this is basically, to describe this one, it's all about how much our frontal systems come up across our continent, or whether they stay south and sort of don't affect our continent as much. Now, depending on the season that you're in and whether the Southern Annular Mode is positive or negative, actually has big implications. So it's almost like a reversal. If you get a positive one in summer, it means wetter. If you get a positive one in winter, it means drier. So it's less intuitive, I guess. I guess the one that we are looking at of the images here, so you can see on the left, again, we're around neutral at the moment, and it's looking to stay slightly positive across the summer months. So if we look at the Australia map on the top left, we can see the positive phase in summer means more rainfall in the east. And so that just enhances the La Nina effect. Okay, so here's a summary. I won't read through all of this. I've pretty much said it all already. The image there. So a lot of these climate drivers are driven by both the atmosphere and the oceans. So we track our sea surface temperatures, which that map is what it's showing. And if we get certain differences between different parts of, say, the Pacific Ocean, then that means whether we're in an El Nino or a La Nina. But I've pretty much summarised all of those three there. And just down the bottom there's some information on the long-term trends. So 10 to 20% decline in southern Australian cool season rainfall in recent decades. So this is a long-term average, and I'm sure you're all aware that we've had around 1.4 degrees warming since 1910. So we'll move on from this. So now what we'll look at is, what does this mean? So we've looked at the rainfall for the last sort of 6 to 12 months. We've looked at what climate drivers are predicting, and now we'll have a look at what then these climate models are forecasting for our country, and particularly our state we're most interested in. So this is the December 2020 outlook. So we've got the maximum temperature, then the minimum temperature, and then the rainfall. So I guess to me, minimum temperature jumps out quite substantially. We're really looking at exceeding our median minimum temperatures across most of the country. Possibly doesn't have as much impact as, I guess, our maximum temperatures and our rainfall. So maximum temperatures, Victoria is certainly looking at higher probabilities of exceeding the median maximum temperatures, and same with the rainfall there. Even though it is more in the north of the state, those chances of exceeding the median rainfall for December, but you could argue in the east northeast there as well. So that's December. If we go one further, we'll look now at the 3-month outlook. So we've got December through to February, so summer. Pretty similar story as to what we saw in December. Certainly minimum temperatures higher than median. I think maximum temperatures there look like there's more of a signal than we did just see, excuse me, in December. So that trend will continue through the summer months, and also the rainfall. I think we're seeing higher probabilities of exceeding the median rainfall across our state as well. Though you can probably conclude from that it perhaps is more likely to affect New South Wales, South Australia, Queensland, but yeah, I mean really most of the country is above average, except for perhaps west coast of Tasmania. And the next one I think was our January through March. So we looked at December through Feb, which was 3 months, and now we've gone 1 month on from that. So January through March. Again, pretty similar stories. Mean the maximum temperatures easing back a little bit. Maybe that's the influence of March. Minimum temperatures still exceeding, and rainfall, it still looks a good chance of being above. Now, I think the next slide will explain a little bit about what that means in amounts, because it's all good and well to say above average rainfall, but what does that mean for us? So I've got December, January, and then the 3-month December to February there. So, you know, it's fairly broad. We don't have a zoomed in version, apologies, on Victoria, but you can see certainly in the eastern parts of the state. I mean, if you went over to the 3-month one, you could say that we're certainly seeing we're seeing parts of the northeast perhaps 50 to 100 millimetres above average for that 3-month period, with most of the east of the state at least seeing 25 to 50 millimetres above average. So that's for a 3-month period. We've got the typical rainfall map down below that, which is suggesting, you know, for that 3-month period, you could be seeing the highest falls in the 200 to perhaps up to 500 range. So, you know, 50 to 100 millimetres more than those typical amounts. So, yeah, I mean, this is all good news for our bushfire season. So hopefully they fall on the parts that we needed. And if we keep moving forward, thank you. So implications for this rainfall, it does increase, as we saw earlier on that first slide, the chance of flooding. So we've got the rainfall map we were just looking at there on the right, and on the left you can see what that means, the likelihood of that, the catchments being so wet that they actually run off and create flooding. So not as a big concern for Victoria, but we are on the average to a slightly above average in some parts. And perhaps you could say in the very far tip of eastern Gippsland there, it could be even very much above average. So just, you know, I guess some awareness is good to go into the season with this. If we go through to the next one, please. So this is our forest fire danger index deciles that we've seen so far this year. So the big map there is August to October, sort of coming out of winter into spring. We've sort of, for Victoria, generally seen around average conditions, but we've got the last 2 seasons there on the right-hand side, so you can see no surprises at all that 2019 was a very much above average to highest on record for some areas. So the good news there is that we haven't seen these forest fire danger indexes being quite as high as we were last year. The next slide. So you may or may not have seen this. This is the Australian Seasonal Bushfire Outlook, which is produced by the Bushfire CRC. This is the latest one, which is September to November, and normal fire potential really is predicted for Victoria. So good news, but I guess as a resource sort of idea, it's always good to be aware of our other states, and you can see that Queensland has increased fire potential, so that's just good to be aware of. Next slide, please. I threw this in just, I did mention back at the start that La Nina tends to have less extreme heat days. You can certainly see how clear-cut and unprecedentedly hot it was last year. So we had many, many, many days where we were breaking records across our state. And this really just proves that it does show that increase in warming as the years have gone on. But yeah, certainly last year was quite a unprecedented year, and hopefully we're not looking at anything like that again this year. But yeah, just to point out that we are likely to see more humidity around, which is also a health concern, not just heat, but also that humidity can be quite uncomfortable. Now we've just got a couple of slides to go. I thought I'd put this one in because it does have a bit of a max along the Gippsland coast there. So one of the impacts from these climate drivers was suggesting that we are more likely to see coastal erosion and inundation along our east coast this year. We already have had some pretty decent incidents along the New South Wales coast, but this chart does actually show sea level rising a little higher also along the Gippsland coast there. So I just thought I would include that one. And This is more just a awareness thing. We are currently in the phase of our thunderstorm asthma service, which we start at the 1st of October, and that will run till the end of December, which is our typical grass pollen season conclusion. So if you hear about these, you can access these warnings on the Vic Emergency page. But yeah, just for your awareness of that product. And I think maybe the summary. Oh, good. Yes, the summary here. So I guess the key points here is we are in La Nina. We have had some reasonable rainfall this year, although November has been quite dry. Looking at La Nina to continue for the summer, and that means that we're expecting higher than average rainfall for our state. And that, along with the SAM, the Southern Annular Mode, enhancing this rainfall. Also, those maximum temperatures were above average as well. So, yeah, I think that's all from me, unless there's any questions.
That, as everybody's always interested in the weather, Kirsty, that was terrific summary of not just the weather, but fuel conditions all the way through to finishing it off about thunderstorm asthma. So the erosion piece is interesting. Yeah, look, fascinating information there that is always good to know. Interesting too, the La Nina that's been pushed back, but does that mean the length of the La Nina is somewhat the same? Because I know that it was predicted to be earlier than what we're seeing it, which I think is now aimed more around late December through until February, March. But are we just seeing it pushed back, that event, or is it being compressed as every week goes by and we don't actually see it eventuate? I know it's probably...
Climate is not my forte, I have to admit already. But we know La Nina is actually active now.
Right.
So I think we declared it in end of September, start of October. So it is currently active, and we're expecting it to last throughout the summer months. Yeah, I'm not sure about what happens if they start later, or whether that. Yeah, I don't have enough understanding on. There's sort of typical times of the year that they tend to break down, just naturally anyway. So I think this is looking fairly standard. But yes, it is currently active. Yep.
I think our farmers will, as much as we will, rejoice when we start to see some of that rain impacting some of those areas that need it. And you can see where the difference is, not just across the past 12 months, but over several years. It's that penetration of getting into the roots and the soil and so forth. So that makes a real difference. So it'll be great to see some decent rainfall. So thanks for your time today, Kirsty. It's really appreciated. A great deal of information that has been of tremendous value to the forum today. So on behalf of the group, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Great. All right, we'll move on now. If I can invite for a State Aircraft Unit update, Commander Don Wilkie. Thanks, Don.
No worries. Thank you, Trevor, for the day. I think Andy's got the PowerPoint presentation there. Thanks. I'll just run through these. I'll be as quick as I can for you with a bit of an overview. This is just an overview of some of the nominal start dates for Victoria, because obviously coming in with COVID, some of these are the international crews coming in, so they've had to come in and quarantine. So some of the start dates have been set. So the ones that potentially affect the southeast region are the large air tankers at Avalon, 2nd and 16th of December, Helitech 342 being the air crane at Moorabbin on the 23rd of December. The other aircraft we've got around the area is Helitech 338 at Moorabbin and 331 at Olinda, and those dates are yet to be determined. So we've got some aircraft started already, and that's when they're nominally coming on. So you can go to the next one, please, Andy. One of the big things with us this year with COVID, going into our COVID normal, is the air crews at the bases. So somewhere like Moorabbin, potentially on a day we can have up to 20 aircrew, engineers, pilots, air attacks there. So to reduce the risk of COVID around the place, the state has extended some of the aircraft with response times from 15 to 30 minutes on the predetermined dispatch at the lower FDIs. That just means to us, if we get a predetermined dispatch, that they'll take a little bit longer to get in the air. But as you can see there, at an FDI of above 25, everything's back on 15 minutes again, and that can be amended by the state response controller or the regional controller at any time for FDI or current fires in the landscape. The next one, Andy. I just thought I'd drop up a couple of photos for everyone just so you can see the different types of machines that we've got this year. So these are our Type 3 helicopters, our air attack platforms, air observing platforms, aerial ignition, being squirrels, mainly this year around the place. So that's our 306 and 309, which go with the air cranes. Next one, Andy. Our Type 2 helicopters are helitax. For us in the southeast region, or District 8, we've got a Linda and Moorabbin, two helitax there. They've both got a nominal capacity of about 1,400 litres in their belly tank. Both of those will be on predetermined dispatch when they start, but also as per normal calls if we need them at a fire. Next one, Andy. Then we go to our Type 1 or our heavy helitax. Now, that's the S61, so that's at Mansfield and Colac this year. So that one has a belly tank of 4,000 litres, or a bucket of about 3,000 litres. And again, next one, Andy. So again, this year we've got two air cranes back. The ones we've got back are the Model 64E, which is 7,500 litres, one based out of Essendon and one based out of Moorabbin. Now, they're not on predetermined dispatch, so they can only be dispatched by calls into the air desk. Next one. Seats or the single engine air tankers spattered around the state. They've got a capacity of 3,000 litres, foam, retardant or water. The closest ones to us are out of Latrobe Valley Airport, so they're available to come up here. From Latrobe Valley to here with a seat is probably 25 minutes. So they're available to us for grass and scrub fires as well. Next one, Andy. Again, this year we've got back based at Avalon the two large air tankers, the Hercules and the RJ32, and they can drop up to 15,000 litres. That's per aircraft. So they'll be there. Again, they're not on PDD either, and they can also drop foam, retardant or water. They were used successfully down in Grantville when we had the Grantville fire, and some success in some areas up at the Bunyip fires when you had those as well. Next one, Andy. As I mentioned, predetermined dispatch is continuing this year. Just through there it says, which I mentioned, from 15 to 30 minutes due to COVID. With fire services reform, some of the areas have gone to FRV. There'll be no change at the present stage, so there'll be predetermined dispatch into the FRV areas as same as previous seasons. Same goes with radio channels. The one thing I wanted to remember for PDD to work is just what I've listed there, that the fire danger is above 12. It's between 10 and 6 on a normal day. On a total fire ban day, predetermined dispatch runs from 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. And when the pages are a Code 1 grass and scrub or undefined fire, that will trigger the predetermined dispatch in those assignment areas. And just if you can just remind your crews and your brigades, it'll actually show on the bottom of the pager message, Air Moorabbin or Air Olinda, where it lists the truck, so you know that PDD has been activated for that call. Next one, Andy. There's a link up there, which I can get that link. Andy might be able to drop that link into the chat. That's a link that will show up a predetermined dispatch page, which is public facing, so you can get access to it. That will show you the current FDI, but it'll also, it's very simple for the pilots, it just goes red and green. So if Moorabbin was on and it was green, it means that if a call comes in the PDD area, it'll go off. Where you can see the one there on the left where it says nil, that means that if the pager went off, the pilots won't go. So for DCCs, and even brigades if you want to check the status of the PDD that's there. Next one, Andy. So just a reminder that we've only got two ways to dispatch aircraft. One will be via PDD to page you when we get it, and the other one's the State Air Desk by the phone. So for us, that's at a fire, we can just request aircraft. The RDA will make contact through to the State Aircraft Unit, or at a level 3 incident control, the incident controller can request aircraft and speak to the Air Desk, and then they will be dispatched out based on requirements and requests. Next one. Just a quick there, I won't read through all of those, but they're just up there on the screen for you, but it's just about direction and feedback to the aircraft and the air attack, where we're there to incorporate into your plan and your objectives. So a quick brief about where you want people to work, our clear anchor point, where to start at the road and work across the head of the fire, rather than just do whatever you do. That way we can actually integrate into the plan and help you to achieve your objectives. If we don't put the fire out, we'll just knock it down. It's the ground crews that come in and do all the work, but we need to be knowing what your plan is so we can assist you as best as possible. Next one. Just again, providing feedback on the ground. It looks a bit different from when you're flying above. You can see things on the ground that we can't. So again, if you can pass on to the crews, some of the hazards that aren't visible to us sometimes through the smoke are power lines, mobile phone towers. The biggest one we've got at the moment, which will affect us, is private drones. There's a lot of people getting drones. They'll get them again now for Christmas. If there happens to be a drone over a fire where we're working, that'll result in the aircraft being stood down and put on the ground, because a drone is a bit like a bird strike. But if it hits a tail rotor or it goes into an air intake, it could potentially lead to a crash or put the aircraft out of action. So if you see drones, get the police to go and find them and get them out of the place. And then just those other points there. If you've requested drops on a fire, just provide the feedback. Is it what you wanted? Is it in the right spot? Did you miss? Is it working well? If it's working well, we can keep going. If it's not working, we can try something else, or you can send the aircraft home if you don't need them anymore and it's not actually working. Next one. So that's just a quick picture there. You can see the mobile phone, the phone tower there, but if you go to the next one, Andy, what we won't see from an aircraft until we get down really low is the wires that are around, and that's just a picture there where there's a transmission line running through there. If that information can be passed on to the aircraft, we'll still look for the hazards, but it's great to have an idea on what we're coming into with hazards sitting above tree line before we get there. And that even comes down to flocks of birds and ducks and those sorts of things. Next one, Andy. Just fireground safety. So just again, that the air attack there is to make communications with the ground, and that's the primary means of communication to the ground is via the sector commander, that where drops are going to be put. The air attack will talk to the sector commander. All the aircraft are fitted with sirens, and basically if you can hear the siren on the ground, you can expect the load to be coming a couple of seconds later. So good communications with the sector commander and the sector commanders of the ground crews where the drops are being done. That'll keep everybody safe. Next one. And this is just a very quick diagram for you. So the red one in the middle is where the drop's meant to be, but because of wind, aircraft speed, a lot of variables, doesn't always go in exactly the right spot. So that feedback is essential that we've missed, and it needs to go over or back a little bit. But this is more about our crew safety. So a helitack can drop anywhere from 30 to 40 metres long and 8 to 20 metres wide, which is why if we're going to be dropping where there's crews on the ground, we'd like those crews to withdraw 20 to 50 metres away from the fire edge, because we don't always get it in the exact spot. Try to, but sometimes they do go astray. Next one. And just finally, so over the last couple of years, they've had a nighttime aviation program where there's been several helitacks that will do firebombing at night. They won't do new fire starts. It's got to be existing fires, and they have to have been seen during the day. So if you are at a fire such as Granville or somewhere like that, they can bomb into the night. It was used at the Bunyip fire on the first night on one of the fires to slow the fire down, and that slowed that fire down into the next morning before they all took off. So it's just a consideration that late in the afternoon, if you're at a fire that's going to be going all night, if you're not sure that you want it, just get the incident controller to make a phone call to the RDO, or if it's an ICC, have the discussion with the state air desk, and they'll put you in contact with the nighttime fire aviation people. And that comes as a package, so you don't need to arrange all the other stuff around it. If you call it, it'll come and do your work for you. I think that's about it, Andy. I think that's the last slide. So that's a very quick brief in that 10 minutes for you, Trevor. Happy to answer any questions, but thank you for the invite.
No, Andy, sorry, Trevor. We've got a question from the field from Sean Taylor, who wanted to know, will PDD be operating out of Traralgon again this year?
Yes, PDD will be operating out of Traralgon, and also there is a Firebird going down to Traralgon this year. So Firebird 307 will be based out of Traralgon, whereas last year they had the fixed-wing aircraft as the AS platform, and there is a helitack going down there. Don't know what the start dates are because they still have to be agreed between the regional controllers and state through the activation meetings.
Great. Thank you, Don. And look, thanks for a quick, short, sharp presentation, which I think hits the mark definitely about what our capability is for this bushfire season. We know that aircraft play an integral role in supporting ground crews on the ground. We know that even over the last bushfire season, the important role that they played across that of East Gippsland will continue to do that. So, look, thanks for again attending today and briefing us. There may be some questions at the end. Again, I just encourage anybody that wants to raise a question, again, the right-hand side of your screen there, Q&A, just write it down there and we'll come to it at the end. So thanks, Don. I'll be pretty quick in terms of pre-positioning of vehicles and the approach for this year. But we did see a lot of success last season where we moved up strategic locations in remote areas, some additional resources to support brigades. And some of those were in the configuration of slip-ons, ultralights, etc., into some of those communities and some of those brigades where they were remote. And can I say, on the ground, and having witnessed some of that, when you had fire running hard at night, and those communities were able to respond that additional resource because we couldn't get to them in a timely manner or that we were cut off, those additional resources saved much property and also a life in the sense that they were available for those local communities, those local brigades, and did some fantastic work. So again, we want to be able to, in some communities, be able to move up our resources, make sure that those vehicles are truly looked after, but they're going to the benefit of the Greater Victoria and certainly those communities that need them most. On top of that, we'll also, if we do get a major outbreak of fire or a lead in time, again, what was successful was moving strike teams up in advance to staging areas, base camps, getting them set up for DMOs to, go over them completely, making sure that everything from the inventories, but also the servicing and everything was ready to go and formed up into their strike teams. And there were a few little mechanical issues that were identified, some of those rectified, and some of those vehicles replaced to get them ready for the response of which they did for over that duration of that 4 months across the Greater East Gippsland. So again, there's some of the avenues that we want to look at and again explore about using our resources to the maximum capacity, but also pre-positioning where we can if we do get a bit of a lead in time, not only to support remote communities where it's appropriate, but also ensure that we're, again, moving them up and getting them ready in a configuration if time allows. Look, that's going to be circumstances dependent and there'll always be the mechanism when we hit the red button and bang and off we go, but if the time allows and we do have wind, particularly where it's in public land and forested areas, then that's just a good learning from last bushfire season that worked incredibly well for us. All right, moving into ground observing and infield support, and I'll welcome District 8 Commander Steve Keating to provide a short brief in regards to current and future where we're taking ground observing and infield support. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Trevor. So before we go through a couple of key slides about the ground observing role and how it's going to develop moving into the future. Firstly, I'd just like to touch on a couple of points made by Chief Officer Cook. He talked about our need to continue to innovate. Now, that's something that's been taken up by changes in expectations by the community. It's also taken up by changes in technology. What we're asking our people to do over the next period of time will be to use things to greatly assist the feedback of information into incident management teams, and that will be complemented by ground observing or ground-based intelligence program. But just remember, as a crew leader, a sector commander or a divisional commander, there is an onus on you to make sure that when you're working on a fire line, that you're providing the most accurate and up-to-date situation reports for your section of fire that you can up the chain. Now, it may be that there's only a 3 or 4 appliance fire and it's being run off the side of the road in an FCV. It's still really important that the incident controller, or on a bigger job where we've got an incident management team in place, that your ops team and your planning team have the most up-to-date information. That leads to another point that was raised by the Chief, and that is the concept of fast-moving grass fires. So this year in particularly, we're going to be dealing with fires where the situation changes rapidly. Now, if you've ever worked in the incident management team, it's very difficult on a fast-moving fire to have really good up-to-date information on location of the fire, the appliances or the equipment that you require to manage in a changing environment, and also you can't I can't forget about the understanding of where all our gear is and our people are for your safety as well. So the accountability of strike teams and people and crews. So if we just go to a quick slide presentation, if we just drop that on. Thanks, Andy. Now, I'm going to apologise in advance because some of these slides are a little bit wordy, but Andy knows the secret word I'm going to use is beep. So if we beep, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so I assume that this presentation will be handed out afterwards, and if you really want to look at all the words, we can duck to them then. But the key point is, because of some fire service reform changes, we've had to re-coordinate how we're utilising the ground observer program that we've used in the past, because that's been heavily reliant on our FRV counterparts. So moving forward, there's the 6 corporately owned vehicles that CFA have for ground observing. They're going to be allocated to strategic locations based on the location of probably the bulk of the ground observing people that we've got in CFA and in FRV. Now, this doesn't discount individual districts from utilising their own teams with their own vehicles. This is to complement and to reinforce in areas around the state that may need this asset. So what will occur is that CFA will try to utilise our own ground observing resources first, and if we get into a situation where we don't have accessible members, then we may put a request into FRV and they'll utilise one of these 6 corporate vehicles. It does mean that the days of cross-crewing between what was our career staff and our volunteer ranks have gone, and that's a position that we just have to work with. But that does open up opportunities for us as well. The last couple of points there on that slide just talk about there's opportunity that comes out of this, and one of those opportunities is with Forest Fire Management Victoria to further develop the ground observing or the ground-based intelligence gathering programs into the future, and we're hopeful that we can go into a partnership with FFMV in that space, which will allow us to demonstrate some of our skill sets, and it will allow our people to engage and grow their own skill sets from working alongside or, within the same vehicles as FMD staff. Now, that won't be happening this year, but that's part of the concept that we've got moving forward. Beep. Thanks, Andy. Okay, so just quickly, CFA ground observing people, as you can see on the map there, District 9 and District 7 have the majority of the qualified CFA ground observers at this stage. Our hope with the plan moving forward will be that we'll be able to grow this across all the districts, and the panacea, it'd be lovely to have every district self-reliant for this vital role of gathering intelligence information and getting it into INTs. We'll go beep again. Thanks, Andy. So, as you can see, there's been 10 years of growth in development of ground observing for the FRV staff, or what were the CFA staff previously. And because of that, there are some pretty highly populated pockets of those staff, which are generally located around the areas where most integrated stations were previously. So that's 7, 14, 13 and 8 around the metropolitan area. They provided a significant amount of ground observing opportunity, and District 27 as well have a high population. So with that, if we'll go beep again, that'll give us our total numbers. So we've got about 279, 280 qualified observers out there at the moment. And as I said, that takes into account that we probably in the CFA volunteer ranks don't have a really strong membership at this point, but hopefully moving forward in the next few years that will grow significantly. Beep again, thanks Andy. So for those who aren't familiar with the vehicles and what ground-based intelligence gathering involves, so the ground observer kits are basically a kit of manual tools and implements that we can utilise to do basic things like our mapping, fire weather observations, so our fuel observations as well, so fine fuel moisture meters in the kits. And it's always had in the last few years, it's had a fairly important intelligence component, which has always been what we call the portable field IT kits, so the PFIT kit, and a ground observing vehicle as well. We'll go beep again. Thanks, Andy. So we'll go again. It's pretty straightforward, that one. So the previous PFIT kits have reached their end of life. So we're transitioning across to the Panasonic Toughbooks, utilising the same tools as our air observers utilise. So that they'll be coming free this summer, and they'll be spread across the districts. And it's hopeful that over the next 12 months that they will replace all of our older PFIT kits. We'll just go beep again. Get us to the vehicles. So basic vehicle, crew cab, similar to an FCV. Again, there's nothing to stop districts from using their own vehicles, and brigades such as Near and South that have got a strong volunteer cohort. They've got I believe they've got a vehicle that's set for purpose as well. So, and there are plenty of others around. The key point though is that we're using people who are trained in this area, because when you're out on the fire line without water, that's one of their biggest risk areas. And we'll go again to the next page. So those 6 vehicles that I talked about, one will be located up at Bendigo, one out of Seymour, Ballarat, down at Warrnambool, one in Geelong, and one is going to be has been moved to District 8, previously in District 13. I do believe that one vehicle has left District 27, and that's the one that's gone over to Geelong. So the point that I'll just quickly make is, if you're planning to put together ground observer teams, you only need to use the corporate vehicles if you're able to source FRV employees. So the agreement is with FRV that they will utilise those vehicles. In the first instance, the CFA, we'd prefer that we use our own people. But if we have a busy summer like we've had previous years, where everybody else is out on the back of trucks, IMTs, doing their work, then it's another resource that we can draw on to get these important roles done out in the field. And we'll just beep again. It takes us to pretty much where we are and where we're going. So currently, this year, moving into this year, it's a bit of a hybrid year. We've got some capacity in CFA. We are going to rely on the FRV capacity probably significantly if we have serious fires this year. But the opportunity moving forward sees that that we will be developing our people, and the plan would be, moving forward after this year, that the ground-based intelligence teams, or ground observer teams as they're previously called, would be would be filled by our own people in the future. So as I said at the start, don't rely on other people to do your work for you. And if you're a crew leader, strike team leader, sector commander, divisional commander, just remember your incident controller or your incident management team need to know what you know. That information is so important. And thanks, Andy. You can drop the slides if you like. That information is so important to allow us, incident management teams, to make accurate plans to achieve the safest and most successful outcomes for our firefighting. And as the Chief intimated, if we're moving into a grass fire orientated fire season, it is more important than ever before, because that information that comes from yourselves on the fire ground will dictate our appliances, it'll dictate our aircraft plan, it'll dictate our warnings and advice messaging. It is the linchpin to all of our successes. Unfortunately, it can also be the linchpin to our failures. So if we don't get that information, we can't make timely and accurate decisions, and we can't make timely and accurate warnings for our communities. I'll leave it at that. If there is anyone who is interested in the idea of the ground observer program moving forward, and you want to get engaged in a quite a challenging, but it's a little bit technical, but it is a role that we'd love to see people who have good skills and knowledge and some IT smarts as well. Watch this space, because over the next 6 months we'll see this evolve to as Trevor would put it, is CFA 2.0, and hopefully it's something that we can fulfil self-sustaining with a new partnership with FMVIC. Thanks, Trevor. That's all.
Thanks, Steve. Somebody who's incredibly passionate about this subject when it certainly kicked off, and it's grown. But again, we want to take it to a whole new level. So again, take Steve up on his offer there and get right behind him in terms of this project, because it's an important role that we want to embrace, and certainly CFA step into more strongly with a volunteer workforce into the future. So thanks, Steve. Now, there are a few questions that are coming through in regards to ground observer. We'll try to provide a reply a little bit online, but we will have some opportunity at the end of this, I'm sure, to answer a few of those questions. So again, if you've got questions in this regard, please put them there. We'll get to them towards the end, or write a written reply as well if we can. All right, thanks, Steve. I'll now welcome our regional pandemic lead, Jess Ploeger, for a quick update. Again, it's going to be in summary just around the COVID and the planning going forward, a little bit about the response issues in that sense, where you can, Jess, but just a quick summary, if you don't mind, in regards to an update. Thank you. Thanks,
Trevor. Good afternoon, everybody out there in your homes or wherever you have decided to log on. Thanks for joining us. I think at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I won't cover off too much of what's already been talked about in previous presentations. But just to probably reiterate that as restrictions ease and our activity increases, it's really vital that we don't, I guess, back off on our enhanced cleaning protocols and hygiene practices. So, you know, continue to practice those enhanced cleaning protocols as per guidance note 004. Continue to practice enhanced hygiene by washing hands regularly, minimum of 20 seconds. Maintain physical distancing where you can. Wear a mask as per the Chief Officer's direction. Minimise gathering in groups for extended periods of time. If I think Garry mentioned, if you've attended for brigade activity or training, once that is complete, please you know, finish up and head home. Utilise hand sanitizer as is provided in most CFA locations. If you're showing signs or symptoms of coronavirus, please get tested and stay at home. So we're minimising that exposure to our vital resources being our volunteers. A bit of an overview of some of the work that's been done in the last couple of weeks within the pandemic management team from a state perspective. The pandemic management team is still currently activated at a level C2 as per the pandemic management plan. That is, C2 level is defined as crisis management in a pandemic situation, being that it affects CFA's day-to-day business across all levels of the organisation. Some of the work that's been conducted, planning. So guidance note in regards to the use of private equipment was complete and distributed last week online. You should be able to access via Brigades Online and the coronavirus link. Reviewing workplace or return to workplace documents. So that's part of CFA's roadmap. And I expect that we may see something come out this week based off some of the announcements that have happened this morning from the Premier. And there is a regional agency task force that is working on summer operations documents, and some of those have come out in regards to alterations to the maximum crewing numbers of vehicles, which is guidance note 012. Public information and comms that have come out. We have issued some information regarding the CFA roadmap. That will be an all-encompassing CFA roadmap, which will incorporate employees and volunteers. The guidance note or the Chief Officer's direction that came out last week is specifically in relation to brigade activity, and Garry shared that activity summary earlier during today's presentation. Happy to go through that again if any of the questions pop up and need clarification about what can and can't be participated in. In regards to, I guess, the COVID lens of moving into operational response over summer, we will have, brigade level activity, including all of the training, should have a COVID coordinator in place, and we've had a few thousand people participate in that training. That's through the Learning Hub, or LMS, as some people are familiar with. That training can be completed by everybody and anybody. There's no restrictions on who can complete that, so we do encourage everybody to complete it. It's not a very long online course, and it will just give you some further information on how to operate in a COVID environment. All fire grounds, staging areas and district control centres or district command centres will also have a COVID field advisor in place. That training is available via EMCOP, EM Learning Portal, that is separate to the normal MCOP login, so you do have to register. Again, that is open to most to complete that training. If you have an MCOP login, absolutely encourage you to complete that training. And then at the RCC, ICC level, we will have COVID advisors in place, and that training started last week and will continue into next week. We'll probably look at having about 10 people across our region trained as COVID advisors so that we have a little bit of a surge capacity to support not only our two emergency management regions, but across the rest of the state. Staging area kits. So there's 11 that have already been released into other parts of the state. They are staging area COVID cleaning kits and are full of all of the required I guess, cleaning supplies, as well as no-touch thermometers, nitrile gloves, masks, everything that we're sort of issuing out to our brigades, just in a much larger scale. We are looking at getting at least one of those kits out to every district. It's just that they have been prioritised into the areas of the state that are already in their fire danger period. Strike Team Leader COVID safety kits are being compiled and they should be completed in the next fortnight. So they will be getting issued to each of the districts. We are looking at probably just doing one per district, even though, they're going to be issued to each group. So there's actually quite a lot. I think there's 150 that they'll be making up across the state. We understand that some groups have more than one strike team that they can form. So we are looking at trying to prioritise extra kits into those groups that have more than one or have the ability to form more than one strike team. Also putting together community safety, similar community safety kits, cleaning kits, COVID kits, which will also be able to ensure that community safety are operating in line with our instructors and any other brigade training that's taking place, so that they're operating under the same principles and doing temperature testing and ensuring they've got their enhanced cleaning and hygiene supplies necessary to do that. What else? We also have continuing support for the return to work location in terms of supplies and the replenishable cleaning stocks to go out to the district offices to ensure, and ICCs and RCCs to ensure that we're, I guess, keeping up with the increased numbers of staff returning to those work locations. So off the back of the numbers that have been announced this morning from the Premier, we don't see that any of the numbers will change within CFA's gathering limits. So they are to remain at 50 for brigade. So that's a maximum of 20 inside, and then there could be another 30 outside or 50 outside. Those numbers remain the same for the general public, so we are keeping in step with that. So there were some announcements in regards to masks. CFA will come out with further guidance as to how we will respond to that recent announcement about masks. If you haven't, I assume you may not have heard what the announcements were this morning because we've all been engaged in this presentation, but they have announced that there will be no more masks required outside unless you cannot maintain physical distancing. So masks are to be carried, but they are no longer required to be worn outside. That is for the general public. CFA will make its own announcements and determinations in the coming days. I think that's about it. Garry covered off a lot of what I was going to discuss in terms of brigade activity. But yeah, if there's any questions, please feel free to pop those in the Q&A section. But other than that, I think I'm done. Trevor?
Thanks, Jess. Again, operating in a environment, to see the restrictions now starting to be lifted to the point where we can get a sense of a new normal. Jess has played a key role in that from a regional point of view in representing our needs and is available outside, I'm sure, of this video conference if you've got any specific needs or questions. And look, it's an evolving space too. It's quite a dynamic, and I thank everybody for your patience while we've dealt in what's been a complex COVID environment, but I think done that incredibly well with the assistance of the pandemic team that have been leading that work at headquarters, providing that critical advice. I'll now head across to Andy because I am conscious of the time, Andy, for a quick Q&A.
Thanks, Trevor, and good morning, everybody. The first question this morning is from Garry Morgan, and I think we'll handball this to either Catherine or Garry if they're still on the line. But Gary's asked, is it true that FRV are charging CFA for turnouts? And if so, how will this affect the CFA budget? Does Garry or Catherine have a response to that question from Garry? Or Trevor, if you want to have a swing at that one.
Andy, it's Garry.
Yep.
Yeah, g'day. Thanks. Good question. I'm not aware of that, so I'd be saying straight up, no, that's not the case. I mean, there shouldn't be any interagency charging. We've got some complexities around false alarm charging and also for hazmat where we can charge but they're actually by the agency, and but there is no cross billing. So that's I think just a straight up no.
Thanks very much, Gary. Next question from Joshua Carson, and I think to Steve, no, to Don Wilkie. Are the PDD maps the same as previous years, Don?
Yeah, there have been a couple of slight changes. The PDD maps are available on EMCOPS that has been adjusted by the regional controller, and in the, the South East Region District 8 area, there's been a couple of changes around the Hastings and back of Berwick area where it used to be predominantly grassland, where it's now predominantly housing. So the majority of our grass and bushfire risk are all still under PDD, but they are available on EMCOP.
Great. Thanks, Don. Next question from Tony Reid, and I think we'll throw that to Trevor. Are the DMOs going to look at our vehicles, or do we have to request a check prior to the fire season?
So we should be always regularly checking our vehicles and noting any faults and reporting them immediately to DMOs, but the DMOs have a standard program where they make sure that all vehicles prior to the bushfire season that are tanking or responding vehicles to bushfire and grass fires are serviced well ahead of the season, and normally they would only service faults and serious mechanical issues from there onwards. So I think it's a dual responsibility, but rest assured that they should have fulfilled their program and that should have been completed or would have been completed by the end of this month, I would think. That that's the way it normally occurs. Thanks, Andy.
Great, thanks, Trevor. From Peter van der Leest, and to Steve Keating. Now we've lost so many ground observers, obviously with the FRV changes. Will training be provided for this absolutely vital resource? And I think, Steve, you touched on it a bit, but if you'd like to expand on that for Peter, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Thanks for your question, Peter. The simple answer is yes. The format that training will take will change from the previous ground observer training. So this is part of the whole review of the ground intelligence gathering format, and I think there is a push to try to make some of the training a bit easier to access. So there may be some more of it comes online than we previously had. But thanks for your question.
Thanks, Steve. The next one from Jody Butler and I think this is in relation to you, Steve, in relation to the PFIT kits. Does the change to the computer systems there include replacing the PFIT kits that are in the staging area vehicles?
Thanks, Jody. I'm not aware of that at this stage. I was made aware that the PFIT kits were now not a supported item, and if you look at the software on them, it's obvious that they have been around a long time. So I'm not sure whether there's a budget or whether that's even been identified as needing replacement at this stage. And I was only made aware that these tough books were coming out in the last couple of weeks. We've managed to put an order for ground observing on the back of an order for aircraft. So I can't answer that one, I'm sorry.
Might have to take that one back up through the district. Just as a note, I've got 2 questions to go, so if you have got questions that you would like answered by any of the team, please chuck them into the question and answer section so we can get to them. The next question, I think, will be for either Garry or Trevor, and it's from David Gibbs in District 8. And the question is, will an FRV ground observer or strike team leader of an FRV strike team report to a volunteer sector or divisional commander?
So my expectation is that they will, and I would think that would be in case. Chief, would you like to make a comment on that one?
Yeah, thanks, Trev. Look, I would have thought so. I know there's been some issues around this, and it's a good question from David. I mean, certainly reporting, ground observers usually will report to, in terms of the reporting line, to the incident controller and the ops officer. So there should be absolutely no doubt about that. But in terms of working through gathering of intelligence to share and put into the ground observing platforms, I would have thought that'd just be, straight up and down fireground operations. So my view would be, David, absolutely that should occur. But the reporting line's usually for the ground observers into the ops or incident controller also.
Great, thank you, Garry. The next question's from Shane Keane to Jess relating to COVID, and he's saying that some groups have more than one vehicle in the strike team leaders thing. So can the team please rethink, for example, the Casey group in District 8 have 9 strike team leader vehicles, FCVs. So I'm sure Jess touched on that briefly, and that's, I think you mentioned, Jess, that it's been identified already, but if you've got any further comment.
No, just to reiterate what you just stated, we can certainly put our case forward, but we do have limited resources, particularly when it comes to the no-touch thermometers. So that's one of the biggest challenges we've been trying to address throughout this, enhanced cleaning kits and COVID kits, is trying to obtain good no-touch thermometers. So that's, we've got, I believe we've got enough to make up the 150 kits, and then a small supply in reserve for those, no-touch thermometers that may fail throughout the state, but not just for the staging, for the strike team leaders. So if we were to try and meet the needs of every single potential strike team, we would be able to do it to the same level. So at this stage, they're looking at trying to get, for the bigger groups that have more than one strike team, a minimum of 2. But what we would also look at doing is, if we have to move equipment or kits across our region based on where the need is, then that's what we would have to look at doing. And our logistics team would be able to probably, best manage that process and ensure that we're giving the same amount of equipment to enhance COVID, response to the strike team that are being deployed versus those, somewhere else across our region or state that are not activated.
Thanks, Jess. Next question from Steve Barling in District 27. Is CFA doing any work with regard to contamination of appliances by our old phones, such as the work recently done by FRV? I'm not sure who'd want to have a swing at that one, whether it's Garry or Trevor.
I might leave this one, if it's all right, without handballing to Garry. Well, I will leave a handball to Garry if he knows more. We are aware of that issue, and I suspect that Gary's been in conversation with the Commissioner, etc., at the FRV. There's a fair bit of conversation around the whole water issue and contamination as well. Chief, did you want to make a comment on that one?
Thanks, Trev. Look, you're right. And yes, it's sort of unfolding a little bit as we speak. So probably maybe I anticipate we'll have some more to say about this in coming weeks, but there's clearly been some issues about the transfer of water, and, that's where hose or water relays from CFA tankers into FRV appliances, and it's sort of got a little bit of noise around it at the moment. So clear to say that we'll continue to look at this closely and keep our brigades informed with whatever we do going forward.
Thanks, Garry. Next one, I think I'll be again either Garry or Trevor. There's some confusion. This is from Craig Aiton. There's some confusion in the Chief Officer's requirements. The Chief stated that there's no cut-off date, but to work towards your FDP declaration, yet the Deputy Chief has just stated that the crew leaders shouldn't allow members who have not completed this to respond. So I guess what Craig is asking is, when is that something that you'd consider should be enforced by our crew leaders?
Yeah, so it's Garry. I'm not sure that that's actually necessarily confusion. I take it it might be, but what we're saying is they're the mandatory requirements for response to the fireground this year. The question I think that was posed to me was, what's the cut-off date? I've said get it done as soon as you can, but obviously the preference would be to have it in place before we're got a fire danger period and we're likely to be responding on a regular basis. But, you know, my view is that if we're going to be safe, you don't actually say, oh, look, we didn't get it done, we could go to this fire, but because somebody said it had to be done by the 1st of December. I mean, the fact is the risk on the fire ground is not actually tied to a date. It's a risk that's on the fire ground, full stop. So being prepared to go to the fire ground is what, you know, we're all saying, and I think we're all in agreement with. And so we haven't put a hard and fast date on it for that very reason, because, as I said, we had strike teams responding to fires this week in the Little Desert. So, you know, that is it. And yet in parts of the southeast, I'd expect the fire danger period mightn't actually hit until, you know, later in December, and depending on what happens with the La Nina. So, you know, as soon as possible would be the best approach.
And if I can just add to that, just Andy, just last season we saw, as we have over the past few seasons, some very near misses where we've had burnovers, trees that have collapsed on vehicles. Again, nobody wants to be in a situation where a responding member hasn't done the training and something were to occur. So there's, again, near misses that can put that front of mind for safety. And the first question I know the Chief gets asked, I get asked, is any incident involving anyone on the fire ground in this regard, have they completed the training? So it's imperative that crew leaders ensure that responding crews have done that training. Nobody wants to be in a situation where somebody gets hurt and they haven't done the training. And you would like to think that that training has put us in good stead, and partly the reason that we didn't end up with any serious injuries even out of last season. It wasn't just luck. I would argue that it was good training that in most cases got us to an outstanding result of no serious injuries last season. We need to make sure that this season is no different. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Trevor. We're a little bit over time. We've got two more. I think we might just draw a line under it once we've done these two last questions, given the time of the day. The next one was from Matt Pond. I'll get to you, Trevor, and that is, will the Edithvale MCV be operational for the fire season?
Thanks, Andy. I'm sure you and I were doing everything we can. Look, Matt, we're doing our best. And look, I can't, absolutely guarantee it, but we're working as hard as we can. I know Edithvale Brigade are doing an incredible job, as we've been doing at a high level, to support the changes that are required to get that vehicle finally online. And I want to get that online as soon as we possibly can, like Edithvale, like the Chief, and we're working as hard and as diligently as we can. But I'm hopeful that we will be getting that online as soon as we can, and hopefully that can be done even before Christmas, certainly as before the start of the fire danger period, all going to plan. Thanks.
Thanks, Trevor. Well, the last question here from Brian Holman, you may as well stay there for, and the question was how, and I'm not sure what this relates to specifically, but how was FRV allowed to alter local brigade response tables without first consulting the brigade?
Well, the simple answer is they shouldn't be. So, again, I'm not naive to haven't had that question. Sorry, I've had that question posed to me in recent times again. We are taking that up with the FRB. So there is a consultation requirement, just as we would consult in regards to them expanding and coming in to support CFA. But I thank you for raising that question, and we are in conversations both at a regional level and a state level about some of those changes, which unfortunately we've been made aware of. But it is our certainly expectation on both sides that any of these changes to response tables, that consultation is genuinely held between the agencies. I think that's fair and reasonable. Everybody needs to know where they stand in the benefit and support of the community in their local brigade area. So thank you for raising that. And again, we are addressing that matter as Chief said on other matters. So thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. And there are a number of additional questions that have come through, but given the time, what we'll do is take them and respond to the individuals who have asked them via email or by telephone over the next couple of days, because it's a couple of minutes over time now. So thank you all for the questions, and I'll hand back over to Trevor to finish off the session. Thanks, Trev.
Thanks, Andy. And look, I'll be rather quick because I know we've just gone over time, but I really want to thank Linda and Andy for putting together today. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes to sort of set this up and contact everybody and the presenters to make sure that this happens seamlessly. I want to thank each and every one of the presenters. You've done a marvellous job, I think, in presenting short, sharp, concise information that I hope will benefit to all. And I really want to thank our volunteers who have joined us, putting yourself out on today to again come together. It is absolutely critical that we continue to engage. We want to hear from you in the field. We want to work together as a team to make the necessary changes. And, you know, we need to keep these communication lines open. We are interested in your feedback. So for whatever that brings, please, after this, send it an email, Southeast Admin. Linda might be able to put something in the comments there where you can refer that feedback to. Again, let's hope for a relatively quiet season off the back of an incredibly busy season, which this region did an impeccable job last season in stepping up and saving many communities. I want to wish everybody a good festive season, a safe festive season. Hopefully no fire activity this year. I know for myself and many others, we were between that Christmas New Year period fixed in Bairnsdale, providing the support to District 11 and to East Gippsland, obviously through to the end of February. So I'm hopeful that this year, with some of that weather that's predicted, might put us in good stead to be home with our families, and let's hope that to be the case. But hey, if it doesn't end up that way, this organisation steps up like it always has and will deliver to support communities, as will the staff to support our volunteers going forward and our partner agencies. So to all the participants, again, safe travels. Again, let's do everything we can to operate effectively and efficiently for this bushfire season. Thanks for your time today, and again, interested in your feedback if you found this session worthwhile today. And again, any of the presenters are available to you either at a local level or back via the district if you need to tap into them, and I'm sure they'd like to hear from you as well. Thanks everyone, and have an enjoyable afternoon.